Measuring Success Right, the official podcast of the Marriott Student Review, a podcast for students by students, where we connect the leaders of tomorrow with the issues of today.
As we share our stories with other people, I truly believe that shame wall starts to crumble.
Welcome to a new episode of Measuring Success Right. My name is Abbie Anderson, and I'm excited to have my friend Brooke Taylor here with us. Brooke, welcome.
Thank you. Excited to be here.
And just to tell you a little bit about Brooke, she's from Smithfield, Utah, a little town near Logan. She's the oldest of 4 girls in her family and loves her little sisters. She served a mission in Colorado Springs, Colorado, and is now studying experience design and management in the Marriott School of Business. Brooke was recently diagnosed with a mental health disorder called OCD. She was diagnosed in May of this year and counts herself very lucky that she received a diagnosis so early because it led her to the right treatment and therapy. OCD is often misdiagnosed because it is so misunderstood. That is why Brooke and some of her other friends who also have OCD have recently started the Real OCD Club here at BYU. As a fun side hustle, Brooke and her friend Brinley run a custom-made tie-dye business called Superfly Tie Dye. A fun fact about Brooke is that she recently went skydiving in Moab on Halloween. So Brooke, I'm so excited to talk to you today. And first off, tell me about skydiving. That sounds insane. How was it?
Honestly, it was so fun. I feel like in my life, I never would have been the kind of person to be like, yeah, I want to go skydiving. It's always just been kind of a fear, like I'm afraid of heights. But an opportunity came up to get a really good student discount at the Skydive Moab place. And me and some friends were like, why not go? And then the only opening was on Halloween. So we drove down to Moab Halloween morning, went skydiving, then drove back that night. And it was just so fun. Have you ever been, Abbie?
No, but it's kind of something I want to do, but also I'm terrified. So.
Yes. No, I felt exactly the same. But I loved it because there was just I was obviously nervous, I had butterflies in my stomach, but once we got up in the plane, I was like, okay, I can do this, I'm ready. And they just don't give you that much time to be afraid. They just hook you in, strap you in, and you jump. And I'm like, okay, we're going. There's no going back now. So it was awesome. I honestly loved it. I highly recommend it.
Yeah, probably the best Halloween yet, right? That's awesome.
Yeah, it was great.
Okay, Brooke, and now kind of just going into your story so far, how did you decide to study experience design and management? What was your path to find that?
That's a great question. So it was kind of a process for me. I was one of those people where I didn't know what I wanted to do when I grow up. I feel like a lot of people when they're younger are like, yeah, I want to be a fireman, or I want to be an interior designer, or I want to be a nurse. But I always was just interested in so many different things. And I remember before my mission, I went for a year at BYU, and I was studying journalism and international studies and political science, and I just switched around to all these classes and never really felt I liked different things about them, but I didn't know what I wanted to do with it. And I was like, well, I'll go on my mission. Hopefully that'll help me to decide how I'm going to proceed with my future. So I went on my mission in Colorado Springs, loved it, loved just being around people and hearing people's stories, and the experiences that I had were amazing. And so when I got home, I took a career exploration class from Amy Soto. She's a professor and an advisor here on campus. And it was awesome. I just learned about experience design, and I didn't even know it existed. And honestly, I was like, I can't study business. I don't really like math. I don't want to take accounting or finance. Those classes just really scared me. But I knew I was passionate about people. And if I wanted to help people, I needed to have some of those, hard skills to be able to apply to a real world job, or I'm passionate about social impact and nonprofit work. And I did some more research on experience design, talked to some people in the major, and was like, okay, this is for me. I can get past the accounting classes. I can take finance. I'll be okay. and it ended up working out, and I just love it.
That's awesome. Yeah, that's so true that sometimes some of the intimidating things we have to go through to be able to do what we want to do are necessary, but that's so true, and I'm glad that you've found where you fit in here. So that's awesome. And then I think it's so cool. I've just seen your page on Instagram, but the business you started.
Yes.
Kind of during quarantine, right? A little bit. Tell us about, Superfly Tie Dye. What was that about?
Good question too. I love how you say it, Superfly Tie Dye. We say it like that too.
You can't not say it like that.
I know, it's like spelled S-U-P-A. Me and my friend Brinley Dayton, she was up at my house one weekend in Logan during quarantine, and this was honestly, like, we'll probably talk about this later, but when I was really struggling, like, in the mental health aspect of things, and it was hard to just, like, feel motivated every day and do the things that I wanted to do, and I realized that some things that help me are, like, to work with my hands or do things that can kind of get my mind off of everything I'm thinking about. And so I had seen on Instagram, like, these different ways to tie-dye that I'd never learned before. Apparently there's like a million different methods. And so me and my friend Brinley were like, let's just take the day, get some dye. Like, we went to Hobby Lobby, got some sweatshirts, got a bunch of dye, and decided to give it a shot. And we made probably like 15 different articles of clothing just that day because we were going crazy. But it was a blast, and it was just a, like, creative outlet, and we realized, hey, like, maybe people would buy this. And so we decided to kind of start up a business, and we just told our friends on Instagram, and it first started out really small, but now we've been able to make a lot and sell a lot, and it's been super fun.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
That's so cool. Yeah, that's cool how it's started out just as a fun idea, and it's grown into something that's actually making money.
I know. I know. It's not like, oh, we're making a huge profit, but we're definitely getting, it's like a good little side hustle, I guess. I have to have a normal, like, job on the side, but it's fun to do it.
That's so cool.
Yeah.
And then you mentioned a little bit about your mental health struggles, and this is something that I wanted to address in this interview because I think it's such an important topic that's not, it's being discussed more, but it's not discussed as much as it should be, in my opinion.
For sure.
And so you said that you've been diagnosed with OCD.
Mm-hmm.
And for those of us who aren't as familiar with it, could you explain just a little bit about what it is? I mean, I know it's so complex, but how can we understand it?
Yeah, thank you for asking. And I like that you said that, you know, mental health is something that needs to be talked about more, because I definitely agree. And as I've, like, talked about it on social media or just, like, with family and friends, it's been really cool to see, like, just how understanding people are, and helping me realize that, like, no matter what you're going through, people want to help. But to go back to your question, OCD, I think just like everybody else, before I was diagnosed or really experienced it a ton, I was like, OCD, oh, like, people are super organized, or they just wash their hands a ton, or they, like, line things up on the shelves perfectly, or their room always has to be clean. They fix crooked picture frames, different things like that. And of course, like, that can be a type of OCD, but there are, like, so many other different subtypes. And at the root of it, OCD, the acronym stands for Obsessive Compulsive Disorder. So it means that maybe, like, a thought comes into your head. For people with contamination OCD, it could be like, oh, like, my hands are dirty. Like, I just changed my kid's diaper or something. My hands are dirty. And so, like, someone without OCD would just wash their hands and, like, move on with their day. But someone with contamination OCD might be like, oh, what if I didn't wash my hands enough? Like, what if there's germs on there and I cook dinner later and, like, I get myself sick or I get someone else sick? And so at the root of it, it's these obsessions that come into your mind that really might not be logical, but that's the thing with OCD, is it goes against logic and it goes against your values. And then the compulsion side of it is, oh, okay, like, I need to wash my hands a bunch. And that's like the physical compulsion to like try to ease the anxiety that those obsessive intrusive thoughts are causing. But for me, what I started to experience was, I guess, just like normal anxiety, which I've kind of struggled with my whole life. And then I've also had struggles with like disordered eating and things like that. But I began to like recover from that. And then I think my OCD tendencies just kind of surfaced as a result of that. And for a lot of people, like they'll deal with it their whole lives, but mine kind of came overnight. It was like a switch flipped. And I literally was trying to go to bed at night and I could not stop thinking about the fact like, oh, I'm feeling really anxious. People who feel anxious like have mental health issues, they have depression, they have anxiety, and a lot of those people commit suicide. And I like couldn't get this thought out of my head. And it was so interesting because yes, of course, like suicide is an epidemic, it's a problem, but I thought that like since I was thinking about it so much that I was going to do it. And so this is classified as harm OCD. And it's where these intrusive thoughts come in that are against your values. So not only would I have like those scary suicidal thoughts, but it would be like, oh my gosh, like, what if I hurt somebody else? Like, what if I do something bad to somebody? Since I'm thinking about this, like, does that mean that I'm a bad person? Does that mean that all these things are real about me? And it was so scary. I literally for a long time was like, I'm going crazy. Like, I don't know what to do. I went to normal therapy, and it was someone who didn't specialize in OCD. And for me, those compulsions were like reassuring myself, like, Brooke, like, you're not a serial killer. You're not going to hurt somebody. You're not a bad person. But that actually feeds the OCD and makes it worse, because as these obsessions kind of stay in your brain, it's important to recognize that they go against everything you value. Like, I love my relationships. I love people. I love my life. Mm-hmm. And so those obsessions are going to attack those things that I really like. And so people will deal with it on a religious aspect, like, oh, I am not worthy to go to the temple, or all these things. And so they'll like compulsively repent or things like that. And that's just one example. There's so many different types.
That's scrupulosity?
Yeah.
I think I've heard of that.
Yes, okay. Exactly. Yeah, that's scrupulosity. And a couple of people that are in my club presidency that we'll talk about later, they deal with scrupulosity as well. And I had a little bit of that, but mostly it was just like this moral OCD, like, oh my gosh, I'm thinking about like these images and like thoughts are coming into my head that I don't like, and they're stressing me out so much and I can't get rid of them. And so I realized like I needed to go, well, you'll probably ask that question later, but I realized that it wasn't just normal anxiety, that it was a different disorder. And that's when I learned more about what OCD was.
Okay. Yeah. That's so interesting. Thank you for sharing, Brooke.
Sorry,
I know that's probably
like a long-winded answer.
Yeah, no, it's not an easy thing to talk about. So I'm grateful for your willingness to share. I think it'll help a lot of people. And yeah, that leads into my next question is, how did you know what you were experiencing was OCD? I mean, you probably hadn't had exposure to that previous to that switch being flipped.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it was interesting because I was doing a lot of praying, right? Like, I'm trying to figure out, Heavenly Father, like, I'm in a lot of distress and I need some help and I don't know what's going on. Like, I talked to like a doctor. I went to this therapist who was treating me for just normal anxiety, which is no fault to his own, but he didn't know that what I was experiencing was OCD, and honestly, I didn't either. And I remember like scrolling through Instagram and just on like your For You page, you know how they like give you suggestions? It was this account, and she's like had struggled with OCD and then had also become an advocate and a therapist. And she'd posted about like, oh, if you're experiencing these thoughts that seem against your values and you can't really get them to go away and it's really distressing, you might be experiencing OCD. I was like, what? OCD? I didn't know that that's what OCD was. And so I was really shocked. It was like, wow, she's explaining what I'm feeling and what I'm going through. And And it was scary to like realize that that's what was happening to me, but also a big relief because I was like, wow, I didn't have a diagnosis at that point. I kind of self-diagnosed myself, which is not good, but I was like, oh, maybe I have this. And then I was able to receive help and like call other friends that I knew had OCD and talk to them about it and get referred to a clinic in Bountiful, and I did an intensive outpatient program at the OCD and Anxiety Treatment Center. And that's where I got the right kind of therapy and received the help that I needed.
Okay, that's cool. That's awesome that you found that on Instagram to be able to take the steps necessary to get help, because
for sure
that probably would have been terrible to keep struggling with that for so long and not know how to get help.
Yeah.
And then now kind of going into what you did about the OCD and starting the Real OCD Club here at BYU. How did you and your friends decide to do that?
Yeah. So I guess I want to make sure that people understand, like, I wasn't right away like, oh, I have OCD, I'm going to start a club and spread awareness. Like, I was definitely really struggling for a long time. Like, it was debilitating. I didn't feel like my normal self. It was really hard to get up in the morning. But after I took the steps to get, it's called exposure and response prevention. That's the kind of therapy, ERP, that works best for OCD. After I took the steps to get that right therapy and then get on a medication that's really helpful, is when I was able to kind of feel more like myself again and be in a place where I could be proactive. So I hope people that struggle with mental health or OCD or anything else realize, like, it's okay if you can't do everything right now, right? Like, I had to realize I have to take this day by day. And once I came to a place where I felt okay, and I still struggle with OCD every day, but it's manageable now, I was like, okay, I want to help other people because, like you said in the intro at the beginning, I count myself really lucky because I went to a therapist, got diagnosed after like 2 months after I started experiencing symptoms. Most people go, the average is 20 years without being properly diagnosed.
No way.
Yeah. And I was so shocked by that because I guess it's just really misunderstood, the OCD. And I was like, yeah, I didn't know what it was before I got diagnosed. So back to your question, I talked to my trainee who I trained on my mission, who I had figured out had OCD later on, and I talked to her, and then I talked to a friend from high school, and then I also talked to a friend that I had met in college after my mission. It was really cool to see, like, God putting different people in my life, like, throughout my path that had experienced this as well. So I literally was talking to this friend that I'd met at BYU, and we were just like at a campfire with friends one night, and I don't even know how we got on the subject, but he was like, yeah, I have OCD. And I was like, what? And I was like, me too. Like, I don't know many people that have it. And he was like, yeah. And then our other friend was there, and he's like, you guys should start a club. And we were like, oh my gosh, like, that's a really good idea, because I'd been wanting to spread awareness about it, just so people can, like, understand what it is, support a loved one. So me and my 3 friends, Caitlin and Miranda and Derek, we decided we're going to start this club and call it Real OCD BYU. It's like an official BYU club now, and we're actually having like our first Zoom get together tonight. I'm really excited. But it's been really cool to share our stories and see how many people within the BYU community, but also outside of the BYU community, reach out to us and be like, hey, I struggle with this, and it's really cool that you're starting a club. And we just want to provide resources and support and love for people that, obviously, we're not therapists. We can't provide therapy, but we want people to feel a sense of community.
That's so cool. And I think especially for people who experience mental health struggles, that feeling of loneliness, feeling like you're the only one going through what you're going through, can be so hard. So, yeah, I think your idea to start this club is awesome because it gives these people a place to unite and to feel like they're not alone, and to take the next steps to get help if they need to as well. So that's awesome.
Thanks.
And then, yeah, I mean, you've kind of given bits of advice to others who may be experiencing OCD or another mental illness. But if you could just say or give just one piece of advice to someone who maybe is experiencing the same things that you were and is struggling to know what to do next, what advice would you give to them?
That's a good question. I'm honestly not an expert, obviously, but I think the best thing for me was not to deal with it alone. I think, like you said before, that isolation and lonely piece that comes in with any mental illness is scary. And like the mental illness is hard enough to deal with on your own, that I felt a lot of shame and guilt surrounding my mental illness, because throughout my life I've been like happy and really excited about life and just ready to like take on the world, and then this hit me and I felt really defeated and I didn't feel like myself, and I was scared and I was fragile and sad and lonely, and I was like, what is happening? And so I felt a lot of shame with that, and I realized, hey, it's so important to like open up, because as we share our stories with other people, I truly believe that that shame wall starts to crumble. I truly believe that like there's, like God gave us each other for a reason, and it's so important to open up to loved ones, whether it be like one roommate or your friend or your mom or your dad, and just let them know what you're experiencing. And then also therapy. Like, I wish the stigma around therapy would be broken. I feel like everyone should go to therapy at one point in their lives. But no matter what you're dealing with, like, there's professionals to help. And a lot of times, I tried to grit my teeth and be like, as long as I just like pray and read my scriptures and do all that I can to feel the Spirit, then I'll be okay. And of course that's true in a sense, but God has also given us medication and therapists for a reason. And so I think just taking that next step to talk to someone, look at your options, and not be ashamed, because there's people that deal with this, and there's hope and there's light at the end of the tunnel, and you can still live a happy, meaningful life no matter what you're going through.
That's so needed, I think, for everyone, for me as well. So thank you, Brooke.
Mm-hmm.
And basically the whole idea of this podcast is, it's called Measuring Success Right. And we like to talk to students and professionals to get their idea of success, which success can be in many areas of your life, right? But Brooke, how would you say that you define success in your life in whatever area it may be?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I knew you were going to ask this, so I kind of like did some research before, or just like digged into my thoughts and thought about it. And I like Googled the definition of success, and it was like, once you reach your goals, or like once you cross a milestone or reach a milestone in your life. And I was like, that's really cool that this is so vague. I feel like everybody's measure of success is different. And for me, in the past couple years, and even just this year alone, these past couple months, I feel like my idea of success has changed, where it's not just, like doing everything perfectly. It's not making sure that my life is filled with ease and no hard times, but I think I measure success now by not being afraid to fail. And that's been a really big turning point for me, is the failure has brought me, when I'm down on my knees, when I've been hurt, when I'm sad, I've been able to feel like, hey, that's okay. This is going to lead you to something better. And that cheesy phrase, when one door closes, like another opens. And I really think that that's true. And I think failure is an integral part of success. And I don't know, it's been hard to realize that, but it's helped me a ton.
That's way cool. I love that. It's kind of a paradoxical thing to think that success is in the failures, but I love that. And yeah, I want to do better to not be afraid to fail and just try things. Yeah. So that's awesome. Well, thank you, Brooke, for being here. It's been a pleasure to talk to you. And thank you, everyone, for listening. I'm Abbie with Measuring Success Right. Have a great week.
Make sure you subscribe to our podcasts on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Play, or SoundCloud so you never miss an episode. Be a friend and tell a friend about Measuring Success Right.
This podcast is a project of the Marriott Student Review at Brigham Young University. You can find us on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook at Marriott Student Review or online at marriottstudentreview.org.
The views and opinions expressed in this podcast do not necessarily reflect official policy or position of Brigham Young University or the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints.